Welcome to the show for sinners and sufferers, where we talk about culture, we talk about theology, we talk about movies. Tonight, specifically, we're going to talk about Halloween. Should Christians avoid it? Why doesn't Kyle like scary movies? I feel like there's a third point. We'll get to it. A communion of the saints for theology. We're going to talk about what does it mean to have fellowship with Christ? What are the responsibilities that we have as Christians to one another within Christian fellowship? As always, my name is Cody.
And my name is Kyle.
And this is the intro.
Forgot to take a sip of my demon
Oh,
water.
I forgot to open it. Yeah, so this is fitting because we're talking about Halloween, and if it's like, excuse me, if it's like inherently demonic, or I watched a few videos kind of just leading up to this, and then one thing is people were like, it's opening you up to Satan to put on a costume and go door to door.
I believe that. If your kid dresses up as a dinosaur, the next step is following Satan.
Well, and there's been similar because just my left and right, Liquid Death, this water that I like, which is just it's water, it tastes good. Their advertising has been really like, ooh, we're gonna be crazy, and we're like, oh, demons love it, or something like that. And Christians are like, they said demons, it's bad.
Boycott.
Yeah, if you drink it, you're drinking demons now. So, which is classic Christian stuff.
Yep.
But anyways, this would be fun because we haven't talked much about this to each other.
No.
But we're talking about Halloween. Should Christians avoid it? So basically, it's October, which,
It is.
you know, the nerds of the world refer to as Spooktober, and theology nerds refer to as Reformation-tober.
Reformation-tober.
Yep.
Why do they call it Spooktober?
You've never heard Spooktober?
No.
That's like
I'm out of the loop on that.
It's very like internet speak, like Ken has cheeseburger type, like old like millennial memes.
Yeah.
Because it's spooky and Spooktober.
Okay.
But yeah, it's like a hashtag on TikTok and stuff. But anyways, yeah, Spooktober or Reformation-tober, because October 31st is both Halloween and the 505th, roughly, anniversary of the Reformation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it is
Big
505 years. I don't know if the October 31st is actually like the date that he nailed his theses or anything.
Yeah, it was.
It was?
So it would be the 505th year since that.
I did the math because it's 1517. So I checked it earlier, so I didn't have to do that on air and prove that I went to Bible college instead of learning math. But yeah, as we all know, Halloween is a holiday originally to celebrate miniature versions of full-size candies, but also spirits and stuff. Well, that landed really well.
That's the weirdest thing I've ever heard. Weirdest description of Halloween ever.
Because you get like the tiny little Snickers.
I understand what you're saying, but I saw a video of this guy who every year he gets a bunch of 2-liter bottles of pop, and he has a slide from his porch, and the kids stand at the end, and he's like, "Which one?" And they're like, "Orange soda," and then he slides it down, and it's like a full 2-liter.
It sounds like a small town thing. Like if you know you're only getting like 30 kids or something, or
he had
30
a
is
lot on his deck.
Yeah,
Youth
youth pastor.
Maybe it could have been a youth pastor.
But no seriousness. No, so Halloween originally, and we'll get into this because the history, it's you hear different tales based on which Christian is trying to frighten you.
True,
but generally it was some sort of like pagan holiday in remembrance of the dead. Some groups would attempt to communicate with the dead. Some groups believe that, you know, the dead would try to communicate with you, and there's a lot of the rituals are about stopping that from happening, essentially.
I've never looked into it too deeply. I know it's All Hallows Eve.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means.
Because it's really like there's various different traditions, and yeah, so it's whichever one It's sort of like that pastor story where they're like, oh, you know, when the priest went into the Holy of Holies, they'd tie a rope to their ankles so that they could pull them out if they died.
Yeah.
And everyone says that, like every pastor said that, but there's no actual Jewish writing or any evidence that that was a real thing.
Yeah. It's kind of just like a folk tale.
Yeah. So I feel like a lot of the Halloween stories are similar, and that like you see some evidence of it being like a celebration of the dead or like a celebration of spirits or of some kind, but then people sort of like make up, like Christians especially, like make up sort of stories around it. And then of course they're like, well, Satanists love it, they worship Satan on that day. It's like, well, of course, like
They worship Satan
well,
every day.
Yeah, well, and it's a day that you're like, aha, Christians hate this day, let's make it worse for them. Like,
Yeah, that's fair.
but Halloween today is not about any of that. Halloween today is about dressing up like Spider-Man and going and getting candy corn and other horrible candies.
Or
but also,
very inappropriately and going to a party.
yeah, that's fair.
It's either or. It's a very kid-friendly holiday or not, depending on where you are.
It's funny is, like I said, I watched some videos leading up to this, and one of them was very focused on like Christians who don't say Halloween is evil. He's like, so this guy's implying that it's okay to dress up as a sexy nurse. And I was like, that dude literally was just talking about kids.
Yeah.
And you're like, because when I think about Halloween, like, unless I'm watching a show that has something to do with it, like, it's never been, like, sexy Halloween has never been part of my life.
No. And well, I think it's changed. So did you celebrate Halloween growing up? Like, did you ever go out trick-or-treating?
Yes and no. So we had like seasons where, so we did some trick-or-treating, and then we'd have like the church event or like, you know, whatever they want to call it, safe alternative stuff. Well, even the church that I recently was a pastor at, they had Harvest Fest, which weirdly wasn't on the same day. And it was like they wanted to offer a safe alternative, but they wanted to make sure it was a success, so they didn't do it on Halloween because then they were worried people wouldn't come because they'd be trick-or-treating.
Yeah, so my church that I grew up in, but for the most part, growing up, we didn't celebrate Halloween. We like went to the pool on that night and swam, or something, or we hid in our basement.
Yeah.
But then more recently, in more recent years, like, I don't know, maybe it started like 10 years ago or whatever, we started doing something like that. We called it Trunk or Treat, where we would all decorate our trunks as different games and stuff, which Brittany and I killed every year. And then people would come and they would play the game. You'd give them candy, and it was kind of like exactly what you said. We did it the first year on October 31st, did pretty well. The second year, we didn't do it on the 31st because the 31st the year before was a Saturday. Mm-hmm. And we thought, oh, it's probably the Saturday that was beneficial. So it was like, I think it was like October 30th or 29th or something.
Yeah.
And it went really well. So we just kept doing that on the Saturday. So that's why we changed it.
Okay.
Because if we were just like, what's the closest Saturday to Halloween?
That's fair. It's probably nice for parents and stuff, but
yeah,
we definitely, as I got a little bit older, my parents were kind of like, we don't need to celebrate. I don't even know if it was really like a Christian spiritual thing so much as it was just like, do you even enjoy this? Like, what if we just stayed home, watched movies, ate a bunch of candy at home? And I was like, yep. Sounds good to me. Like,
because kids only care about the candy. Like, I mean, it's fun for them to dress up and everything.
Yeah.
But you usually can do that at school now.
Well, a lot of years I was like a clown, or like one year I was a crayon. Like,
wow,
it wasn't like
terrifying.
Oh, yeah, because it was like homemade costumes for the most part, or like dollar store costumes. Because my family wasn't very well off in my younger years. Like, as I got older, we did better, but in my younger years, we weren't like a well off family, so it was a lot of homemade costumes and stuff. So I was never like super stoked to be Batman or something like that. Like, it was even like, I remember having a knight costume that was pretty minimal. It was like kind of a helmet that didn't really fit, and like a chest plate and a sword.
Yeah.
And So that aspect to me was never that exhilarating. Like, I don't think I've ever had a really good costume. Even
Well, and are you gonna spend like why do people spend all this money on Halloween
Yeah.
costumes for their kid when they have to get a new one every year?
Yeah.
You can only use it one night, and you're gonna spend like so much money on it. Seems like a waste to me. But I'm also not a child anymore,
Yeah.
so I don't understand the joy of that.
And I think as a child, part of it is just the like shared experience. And that's something that as generations go on, that like big, or what it was the term, like a common experience, like it's less of a thing. Because even when TV shows aired like one episode per week at a certain time, and it'd be like, oh, 3 million people tuned in to the season finale of the show, we were having a collective experience.
Yeah.
And there's fewer and fewer of those things with the format of TV being like you just binge it. So we're all watching at different times, with like more and more we're not going out to do things, especially kind of post-COVID. People were just in their homes playing video games or whatever they do.
Yeah, and people are more scared now because of COVID stuff about
Yeah.
like grabbing candy from strangers.
Well, and even like in youth ministry, like so growing up in a small town, I kind of caught the tail end of like the Wild West of youth ministry days, when like you could do events that were extremely dangerous and like nobody would bat an eye.
Yeah.
But a lot of those things created these like really core memories for kids. They're shared experiences. They're things you got to experience with people. And I think Halloween is one of those things that's kind of like left, and that all your friends are doing it. Everyone's doing it. You're all going outside. It's wild. There's people in costumes everywhere. Like it's
People
like,
decorate their homes.
yeah, it's like a shared cultural moment.
It's funny funny story about Halloween. We moved here I guess it was basically a year exactly at this time. So Halloween was like a week or two after we moved here. And so we live in a little complex. So we're like, for sure, there's going to be some kids that just like run around the complex and like get candy there. And we just didn't, we were like trying to unpack everything because our stuff came like around that time too.
Yeah.
So we just didn't go get stuff. And we're like, we'll just keep the door locked and keep the lights off or whatever. That should be a sign. And then we were sitting there all night watching TV or whatever, and no one rang our doorbell. And it was like super weird. We're like, that's strange. And then a few days later, we found out that our doorbell doesn't work. So there was probably some children standing at our door ringing our doorbell all night, and they never got candy. It's very sad.
Sad story.
Yeah.
But anyways, we're not really discussing what we're supposed to be discussing, which is like, is this a horrible, awful, terrible thing for Christians to celebrate?
Like, who am I to say?
Who are you to say? Well,
I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think there was more of a case when we were growing up that like there was more of a connection to that kind of like demonic witchcraft stuff, because people like dressed up as witches more and things. Now it's like kids dressing up as like Captain America, and it's a lot more just like kids go out to get candy. It's just a night of the year where like everyone does something special. So I don't think it's like really that much. Also, I've noticed that a lot more churches are just like, oh, have fun on Halloween with your kids. Like it's more just like, of course you do Halloween. So it seems like people have just gotten past it.
I still hear a lot of Christians, especially online, I guess, more than in person, that are like quite bothered by it, and they think it's a terrible thing. But I think it's a case of what's called a genetic fallacy, is a logical fallacy in argumenting. That's it. That's what you say. And what a genetic fallacy is it's when you dismiss something based on its origin without weighing its actual quality. So if like, you've heard like, oh, there's a new way to make coffee and it tastes great and it works, and there's lots of evidence that it works great and it tastes great, but it was invented by Adolf Hitler, like then you're like, I want nothing to do with it.
Right.
Like you discredit it based on its origin. I feel like this is sort of a case of that. And that Halloween today, like we said, is you dress up and you go collect candy.
Yeah.
And there's not much, like, even in, like, some people have spooky decorations and stuff, and I'll get back to the scary aspect, but it's more about just dressing up in a costume, getting candy. Like, the background, the spiritual baggage isn't a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But Christians are like, had this origin, therefore is bad. But
Right.
we don't do that with, like, Christmas.
It's because Jesus was born on Christmas.
No, it
That's the
wasn't.
origin of
He
Christmas.
was born in April, probably.
Yeah.
Like,
I know it's weird because we just like choose things, but then like I feel like this isn't the story of Christmas that like Christians kind of like took it over.
yeah.
So I think like the Christians are like, yeah, that's a great holiday
Yeah.
because we celebrate Christian stuff. And then Halloween, there's just like, what are you gonna celebrate that's Christian on Halloween? So you
Yeah.
can't really like take it over.
Well, I saw a discussion on Twitter. Someone, I think it was Ruslan, brought it up, this like genetic fallacy thing. He was talking about the names of the days of the week.
Yeah.
How like we still say like Thor's Day and like all the days of the week and the months of the year, I believe as well, are all named after like pagan gods.
Yeah. Or
But-
kings or something.
Yeah, but
too,
we're not
yeah.
like, we're going to come up with Christian days of the week because we don't want to, because Sunday, no, we don't worship the sun. We worship the Lord. It's Lord Day now. Like,
yeah.
there's just interesting places where we decide to like really chase down and like beat the horse over like the origin of something, in places where we're like, we'll just live with it.
Yeah, it's yeah. I don't know why we do that. It's kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
But there's I mean because there is specific Christian holidays like Easter, and
Yeah.
like culture has kind of been like Easter bunny,
Mm-hmm.
fun. But it's actually not really taken off, to be honest. Like
Yeah.
most people still know Easter as like it's a Christian.
Yeah, Easter
Holiday.
Bunny is not popular.
No, it's like, which is funny that churches do like Easter egg hunts
Mhm.
on Easter Sundays, because like whatever. But it's just, yeah, it's kind of like people maybe have pancakes on the weekend or
Yeah.
something, but it's still a Christian holiday. So it's this weird, I think it's almost like a weird Christian complex that we have, that we want to be in control of a lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
and we want to like be popular with culture as well. So, you know, when we have victories like Christmas and Easter, we love those things. But then when it's like Halloween and it's a
Mhm.
very just like kind of secular thing, we're like, that day sucks. I hate that day.
Yeah.
We don't celebrate that. So that's my opinion on it.
So I think it's interesting too with a lot of this discussion that people are like, oh, there's like skeletons and ghouls and things, which is all inherently demonic. It's like anything that's scary is inherently demonic. And it's funny because when you think of like, or like necromancy, raising people from the dead, the only time that ever happens is from God. The only raising from the dead.
I thought you were saying necromancy.
No, not necromancy. The only like raising from the dead at all
Yeah.
is like a good thing.
Mhm.
Or was it Ezekiel's with the bones, and the bones suddenly get wrapped in flesh? That must have been pretty
Lazarus.
horrifying to watch. The bones suddenly
would
stand
think
up
so.
and you're wrapped in flesh. But I just think it's an interesting discussion because I like scary movies. You do not,
No.
but I don't know. I think that there's got to be some like entry point ones. Well, Scooby Doo, huh? It's kind of scary.
That's a scary movie.
What about Shaun of the Dead? Have you seen that
I
one?
haven't seen it.
Oh, it's quite
The closest I've gotten is probably something like Shutter Island.
okay.
That's pretty scary,
Yeah.
I would say. No, I watched in high school, a bunch of us after youth group watched Paranormal Activity 2.
I've never watched it, but I hear it's like especially bad. As far
I
as,
don't
like,
remember. I just was
horrifying.
terrified.
Oh yeah.
It was either that or it was When a Stranger Calls, were my first two attempts at watching scary
Okay.
movies. And I did not watch most of When a Stranger Calls. It's gross, for one,
Yeah.
and it was scary. Paranormal Activity 2 was freaky because it's like demons and spirits. And after we watched that, all of us were very scared. and we started reading the Bible and listening to Christian music.
Nice.
Because like it was to the point actually with that one where it was like I mean in my little high school brain was very scared, but also we were like, spirits and demons are real, and so is possession, and that is terrifying.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I wasn't a fan of that. And then I don't know if I've really. Oh, there was a random other one I watched where like someone was like in a cabin and this guy was like trying to kill them. But
So like 30 or 40
I forget what
movies
it's
that could
called.
be.
Yeah, but anyways, none of them appealed to me at all.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I would sit in a theater or in front of my TV and watch something to scare myself when I could watch something that I actually enjoy.
Yeah.
Thrillers like Shutter Island are great.
Well, and that's, yeah. And I think that's where like I draw a line too, where I specifically, if I'm going to watch a new movie or something, I don't watch anything that deals with real things, like possession movies or things about like Satanism, those sorts of things, because I think that's foolish that it's toying with real things, whereas like werewolves clearly don't exist.
Scooby Doo is an example where it's like cartoon and there's a talking dog.
Yeah. But yeah, when in a lot of them, so some of the movies are definitely just made for the sake of trying to scare people. And some of them are like gross out horrors, which I don't enjoy either. And I think part of it, like with any movie, we use the discernment of like, what is the message of this movie? Is this about the triumph of good, or is this about glorifying and the power of evil? And that's something that when I was in Bible college, when an older student brought up with her, like, I don't like horror movies or haunted houses or any of those things because I think it's glorifying fear, and we should not be a people of fear. And I mean, I don't really watch movies that like make me legitimately afraid. Like one of my all-time favorites, which I don't remember total content, so I won't say I'll recommend, but It Follows, because it's a situation where you're like tense and you're thinking like, how would I get out in this situation? Like what? Because it's just like you're given something's following you. Here's the bounds. Like it's possible to survive and get away. And it's like an interesting predicament to be in. And there's shows like, well, and you can have, so Ghostbusters, so like a scary movie, but it's very campy it's and fun. Funny.
Yeah.
Did you see the new one, Ghostbusters Afterlife?
No, I think I have it on my like watch list.
It's actually, I just watched it a couple of days ago. I was putting it off because the other Ghostbusters reboot was awful.
Yeah,
like just absolutely terrible.
Awful.
Ghostbusters Afterlife was really fun and like fairly family friendly. I think it was very much geared to like 12-year-old kids, that kind of range.
Yeah.
But quite good. Marvel released with no promotion Werewolf by Night.
Yes, I've heard of that.
It's so good.
Really?
I loved it. It's weird they didn't promote it because they promote garbage like She-Hulk.
Don't get us in trouble.
Anyways, but Werewolf by Night was super good. And it's like, yeah, it's scary, but the point isn't to be scared. It's just like, and it's about the hero and it's about survival.
Yeah.
And those sorts of things. But yeah, I think it's interesting, to say the least, that people were like, thing is scary, therefore is sin.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think it's more about the glorification of it. A great example that I thought of was Joker, the new Joker movie.
Yeah.
People were like, this is great. And like technically good movie, like very good filmmaking and acting and stuff. I did not enjoy that movie whatsoever. I was very disturbed at the end of it.
Yeah.
Of watching it. And I think the reason, like, I thought it was going to be more of like a look into like his mental health and mental state, which it kind of was. But then it was like this weird kind of like gory violence type thing near the end. And I was just like, that was kind of disturbing that they showed all that. And I think that's an example of like where it's a movie where it was almost glorifying in this guy becoming bad
Yeah.
or evil. And that's where I think you can question it more.
Yeah.
Not to say that like I would say you should not watch that movie, but it's just it is an interesting like discernment thing.
Yeah. When I think true crime is like just as bad, if not
That's
worse,
fair,
because
yeah.
it's glorifying in a person's horrible acts. It's taking joy in hearing about, like, exploring these carnal things and imagining, like, why do we enjoy learning about serial killers?
Well, and there's also even a side of that where it's like glorifying in the act of what they did, or there's like other ones where it's like this is kind of the psychological analysis of what happened to this guy and why he did this, which I would maybe say is a little more okay. But then they just like go off the rails and like show him like chopping people's heads off and stuff.
Yeah. Well, and there's lots of shows that aren't in the horror genre that are glorifying and suffering, and it's like the point of it is to watch people be miserable and suffer.
Yeah.
And people are like, haha, it's entertainment. And it's a
What's wrong with you people?
like,
Exactly.
yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. Whereas I don't know, I like movies I just enjoy the sort of like what would be traditionally, like, I use scary not as in literally frightening, but as in like almost like a descriptor. Like, I like skulls. I think skulls are cool. I like Grim Reaper's cool looking. Like, I like that sort of aesthetic. I like the more hardcore things.
Yeah.
And that's what I enjoy in movies. Yeah, when it starts to deal with real things is when I'm usually put off by it. But yeah, all
That's
that
fair.
to say, if you're gonna celebrate Halloween with your kids, maybe don't have weird demonic things. Don't have your
Yeah.
kid dress up as a witch. Don't like, yeah.
Weird like demon spirit Ouija board stuff.
Yeah. Oh, Ouija boards, man. I can't believe people, like any people, even if you're not a Christian, people are like, you know what would be a great idea? A Ouija board. I'm like, why?
Run away.
Yeah, just no, burn it,
That's
please.
terrifying.
It's ridiculous. Anyways,
Get on to happier things.
I don't know if that was
now.
a helpful discussion at all, but there we go. We talked about Halloween. We talked about
This
scary
is why
movies.
we have like timestamps, so you can just
Yeah.
skip past.
I
all this.
recommend Ghostbusters Afterlife. I recommend Marvel Werewolf by Night if you're for an older audience. They're both safe. Just Werewolf by Night would actually be really scary for kids.
That's fair.
Theology time.
I would like theology. I would like theology. I would like to propose theology.
We're talking about communion of the saints. This is chapter 27 of the 1689 confession, which I almost skipped because we just did like 40 episodes on the church, and I thought this sounds like a lot of the same, but it's not.
But we're gonna do it differently.
It's different-ish, but no,
Nice.
it's good. This is more one. It's talking about being united with Christ, and then being united with each other, and then sort of the responsibilities of that. But it's not so much about like how to do church, and more about what it means to actually be in fellowship and unified. But well, let's just get into it. We'll figure it out. It's 2 paragraphs, chapter 27, so we're going to do them both. But here's just the first one. It says, all saints that are united to Jesus Christ, their head, by his Spirit and faith, although they are not made thereby one person with him, have fellowship in his graces, sufferings, death, resurrection, and glory. And being united to one another in love, they have communion in each other's gifts and graces, and are obliged to the performance of such duties, public and private, in an orderly way as do conduce to their mutual good, both in their inward and outward man. I think it's funny that it specifies, it's like, what's the wording? Although all saints are united to Jesus Christ as their head by his Spirit, though they're not made one person with him. We're not the same person as Jesus, which it's interesting that in the 1600s, they're like, we should clarify this because it needs to be clarified. and yet that's like certain progressive branches of Christianity today are like, we're the same as Jesus.
Yeah, there is a weird, like I've seen a lot of clips and sermons of guys who are like, I forget the phrasing, but it's like you are of the same seed. You have you have Christ in you, or his literal essence is a part of you now. You're the same kind of on the same level as him. I forget the wording. It's kind of weird wording, but
Yeah.
it is interesting because you are seeing that more, and it probably comes from this idea of being united to him, or being like children of God, being united in Christ. It does not mean that we are the same as Jesus at all.
No. What it does mean is that we are united with him. We have fellowship with him in his graces, sufferings, death, resurrection, and glory. And 1 John, this is biblical. 1 John 1:3 says, well, it says it in the other order. It says, that which we have seen and heard we proclaim also to you, so that you too may have fellowship with us. And indeed, our fellowship is with the Father and with his Son, Jesus Christ. So to be united with him in his graces, this is referring to, justification and sanctification, like, what's the phrasing in Ephesians? Like he's given us all things. Essentially, what's the wording? You don't know?
He's given us all things.
It's
All things means all things. Well, it's like it's speaking to the fact that it's like a spiritual thing of being united to him, and you receive those benefits of being a part of his family.
Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who has blessed us in Christ with every spiritual blessing. That's the phrasing I was thinking of. Yes. Yeah, it's every spiritual blessing. It's we have fellowship in his graces. We're justified because of him, because of his righteousness. We're sanctified because of his holiness, because of his spirit. So having fellowship with him is taking part in those graces.
Yeah, receiving the benefits of that as one of the benefits of it. Yeah, and for I can't remember the psalm, but there's a psalm that repeats over and over again, to forget not his benefits, all of his benefits, and all that you have in him. So these are two major things, but two big things. But the other part of fellowship that we get is his sufferings and death, which in a strange kind of roundabout way is also a blessing and benefit to it, because we suffer with him because we're united with him. I think partially that means that we are we're suffering because we follow him, and that's actually a blessing because you're denying yourself and you're living for him. So that's where the kind of blessing comes. But also there's that verse that talks about how we're filling up the afflictions of Christ, which is a very confusing verse, because it almost seems like it's saying that there is some lack in what Christ did on the cross, and that like we need to continue to suffer to kind of fulfill it. But it's not what it's saying at all. It's saying that when we suffer, we're actually suffering in a way that's glorifying to God, because we're willing to like lay down our lives for the cause of Christ. It's a very weird way to think about suffering.
It's an interesting topic, because you were talking about those people who are like, oh yes, we are the same substance of Christ, like his blood is in our veins, we are the same. And they're always like, yeah, we're united with him in his graces, we're united with him in the resurrection and power and his suffering. It's like we never want to talk about being united with Christ in his suffering, but it's a benefit, like you said, because we can suffer for his glory, and we suffer because of him, because of our unity with him. But we also have, like, we're united to him in that it's a shared experience, which I mentioned, because he's suffered, we suffer. It's something that we have in common, that we can have that empathetic connection with our Savior because we have both suffered. It's actually something that unites us. Whereas if we had a God that came and suffered and went through all these horrible things, and then our life was just perfect and we never suffered, we wouldn't be able to relate or connect with him on that level in that way.
And he like the fact that he understands our sufferings as well. In Hebrews 4, it talks about how he sympathizes with us. And that's because of his he knows everything, but also his lived experience on this earth, seeing the suffering of the world because of sin. He understands what we go through, and especially because of his death on the cross, where he took on the ultimate suffering. So any type of suffering that we go through in life, with like loss or pain or financial distress or whatever, we can actually go to him and feel secure and safe with him.
I think the thing to clarify before we move on to resurrection glory is that we don't earn anything by suffering. And I think that's something that as like a young Christian, I kind of misunderstood that. Like whenever I was suffering, I was like, oh yeah, building up my holiness by suffering. Whereas Jesus' suffering was meritorious. It earned something. It achieved something. Our suffering isn't earning us anything. It's Christ's suffering that earned. It's rather we're united. We have that fellowship with him because of our suffering. But yeah, we also have fellowship with him in resurrection and glory. I think there's I was going to try and look it up, and I was like, oh, there's no way I'll find it in time because Hebrews is huge. But there's a Hebrews passage that talks about him being the first. Like he was the first who was resurrected, but we will be resurrected in him, with him, and we'll be glorified. That's something that I think is odd for like as non-charismatics, as non-prosperity people. We kind of almost shy away from talking about how we will be glorified in the last days, how that he has like a plan for us that, was it Paul or Peter that says, I think it's Paul who says, do you not know that you will judge angels? Like we're not the same as him. We're not glorified to his level, but we will be glorified because of him, because of our connection with him, our fellowship with him.
Yeah. I think it's hard for us because we're supposed to be humble and all that kind of stuff. And it's hard to say in a humble way, like, oh yeah, I'm going to be ruling over angels and they desire what I have with Christ. But it's a reality of what we have, like that relationship that we have with him. And that's not like even just pumping up humanity. It's just like the reality that like when Christ created the world, he created things for humans.
Yeah.
And humans were the like pinnacle of all his creation. And that's how it is. And so the whole like goal of salvation is to bring people back to that relationship. And part of that is the glorification where we get to be with him, and it says to rule with him as well, to reign with him also. And that's something that we don't fully know how it's going to work itself out necessarily, but like practically, but a reality of, those who have faith in Christ.
Yeah. I think this is major contention, red lights, alarms, but I think that's where Paul gets at with marriage as a foreshadowing of, is we're like, I hate saying it because it sounds so traditional and people would be mad, but like we were made for him as a wife is for her husband, but he loves us. So this is back and forth where it's like, Reformed guys are all like, everything's for God's glory. Everything's for him. Like we are worms. Like think of the Wayne's World scene. But it's like we are worms, like beating ourselves down because everything's for his glory. And it's true. Ultimately, it's for him. Like we are a people created for him. That was the plan. I think it's Hebrews as well. It talks about that was like the plan from creation was to separate out, to create a people for him. But in that, he loves us because we are the people created for him, because that he's done all these things for us. And there's so much of creation. There's goodness for us to enjoy. And there's we're going through a catechism at my church right now. And I think they keep calling it our catechism. I think it's just like the Westminster, and they've rephrased it to be more Mennonite.
Oh, okay.
But just recently, I think it might have even just been this Sunday, they had the like, how do we glorify God? And it's like we glorify God by loving and enjoying Him. And yeah, like it's a good thing. There are good things to be had in Christianity. We can live for His glory and be focused on Him, and it also is good for us.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is all spoken about in Romans 6, 5 and 6, which says, "For if we have been united with him in a death like his, we shall certainly be united with him in a resurrection like his as well. We know that our old self was crucified with him in order that the body of sin might be brought to nothing, so that we would no longer be enslaved to sin." It talks about all the benefits of fellowship with Christ and the redemption of suffering and redemption of death that comes through the message of the gospel as well. Yeah.
Well, the second part of this paragraph, and we'll kind of transition into the next paragraph with this topic as well, is that we are united in love to each other, to all believers. And it's not just, those in your immediate vicinity, those in your like church, but we're united with all believers, with brothers and sisters. And what's the phrasing here? Being united with one another in love, that we have communion in each other's gifts and graces. And I think this is something that we didn't really get into in the church part, and that's why I think we can still talk about this and it's not redundant. Is like we've said, Christianity isn't a like Lone Ranger. It's not just me and Jesus in the wild. Like it's meant to be done in community. What this highlights is that we need each other's gifts and graces as parts of a body. We complement each other. We fill each other's strengths and weaknesses. We need the plurality of gifts to be healthy and full as believers and as the church. So what this is doing is it's encouraging us to be united in that, to encourage each other, to build each other up and empower each other to operate in our gifts so that we can be blessed by each other's gifts.
Yeah. That's one of your first questions you have for this is how can we encourage and empower others to act in their gifts? I think it's interesting the way we approach spiritual gifts, because we know that every believer has a gift from the Spirit to be used for this purpose, to edify one another and encourage one another. And it's become a thing where it's like, well, these are the gifts. Maybe do a test and figure out which one you have, or it's just like, which one are you naturally good at? Are you more of a pastoral person? Are you more of a service type person? And it's just kind of like a funny thing where we're like, well, which gift do you have? And people are like, I don't know. And it's like, well, maybe you have this one, or do a test and figure it out. And then it's kind of like, oh, how can I use that? Well, you can be the administrator for the children's ministries. Conveniently, we need someone for that. And it's funny because the Bible talks about gifts being given and that we should use them. And but the way we've kind of approached that is like, whoa, this is a very practical thing where someone can have a gift of mercy, so they should be doing mercy ministries and things like that. And it's just so focused on kind of a structure of a church in today's age, where it's like actually being a merciful person to another believer as well. Like it's not just getting that person to run a program that correlates with that, but someone who's has the gift of pastoring, doing that one-on-one with someone is it's not just get up on stage and preach a message.
Well, and I think pastoring and teaching are kind of two separate gifts as well, because we see teachers who definitely are not pastors and pastors who definitely are not teachers.
But even teaching, we just think of as platform teaching.
Oh, for sure. And it's funny because people always tell me I'm so good at platform teaching, but I honestly think I'm way better in a group, a small group or something like that, where people can ask me clarifying questions. But yeah, it's to our benefit. 1 Corinthians 12:7 says, to each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. It's for the common good that we have these gifts. So on one hand, that's for us going, okay, how can I use my gifts for the common good? If I have a gift of a pastoral gift where I can shepherd and guide and love people and care for people. How do I do that? If I have a teaching gift, how do I do that? But also seeing that in others, like if you see some like young man who's, it's like, man, that guy really understands a word. He's really good at communicating it clearly and simply. He has a teaching gift. Like, I mean, just anecdotally, the vast majority of churches I've ever been a part of have had no place for someone with teaching gifts. Like, they're like, how dare you think you have teaching gifts? It's like, I do though. Like,
Well, go to seminary and become a pastor.
yeah, go to somebody else's church. Get out of here.
Yeah.
But it's for the common good. It's for all of our good that when we see those gifts in people, we encourage them, but also empower them, that we actually platform teachers, that we actually give resources to servants so that they can serve. Like if someone's like, oh man, I really have a heart for like, I don't know, helping people in addictions. You're like, that's nice. Or you can be like, oh, let's fund you. Let's give you sandwiches to hand them. Like whatever, like however we can help. Like it's for all of our good for us to be investing in people in this way.
Yeah, there's a way in which we can do it. Like we focus a lot with the like Sunday morning teaching is often where we go with teaching. I'm just using that as an example because I think it's very clear for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But like when it comes to teaching gifts, they're like, it's like, okay, Sunday morning preaching. That's what we have. Or you could do like a community group or whatever. But typically that's what we think of. But a lot of pastors are like, well, I'm the pastor, so I'm teaching on Sunday mornings. And they're like, they hold the pulpit so tightly. Because part of the reason ends up being like, well, I'm the best teacher. Yeah. Like I'm the one who's hired to teach because I'm good at it. And then you have this like younger guy who's like, I really think I have a gift for teaching. They're like, let's find you a kids class or let's find you a youth class, but not the big stage quite yet. And I know people where it was like, we're going to start you off here and maybe eventually we'll do it. And you can do the announcements to get you more comfortable on stage, but maybe we'll get you teaching. And it's like, literally, you can have a Sunday where the guy is not like perfect at speaking.
Yeah.
And it'll actually encourage people because they see someone who's actually exercising their gift in teaching. And he doesn't have to be polished. He doesn't have to be perfect. But when you see like how he preaches, where he came from, if the theology is good, like that's the main thing.
Yeah.
The rest of it, you then like meet with him during the week and you say, hey, here's just a few pointers on being more presentable or whatever. And that's how you do it. But we're so scared to like actually let them up on stage.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny. So you mentioned they're like, oh, you have a gift of teaching. Let's put you in the kids ministry. I'm like, that's kind of a separate gift.
It is actually so hard. If you're a really good, like deep kind of teacher, like theology teacher, it is so hard for you to actually teach to kids because you have to like.
I suck at teaching kids.
Yeah.
And it's so funny when I do all right with teenagers, but even that, it's funny as I forget because every once in a while I'm like, that's not really a gift to be good with teenagers because it seems so natural for me. And maybe you've noticed this as well because I know you're good with teens. But then you'll see people who so clearly don't have a gift to work with teenagers or people are just like, they're so annoying. They're so loud. I'm like, yeah, they're loud, but it's hilarious. Like, but yeah, it's funny how like there are definitely people who are gifted to teach children and people who are not. And it's sort of just wherever is convenient. But it's too, you were talking about how the lead pastor holds that pulpit so securely. And one thing that I've found, again, anecdotally, but I'm sure other people have experienced this as well, is that having that platform validates you in the eyes of the congregation. So that like, I would be telling people, yeah, I went to Bible college. I believe I'm called to be a pastor. I have pastoral gifting. And just like, oh, okay. Oh, yeah. And like, no one would ever like come to me for pastoral issues or seek counseling or anything until I preached. Yeah. Then suddenly everyone's like, oh, pastoral gifting.
Yeah.
And it's like preaching. I don't think I'm that great of a preacher. I just think I'm not bad. But by doing that, suddenly it's validated. So it's similar. If there's people who like, my gift is encouragement, it's like I wish I could encourage people, and they never have that space. You just need to kind of give them that platform so that you'd be like, hey, everyone, look at this person. They're good at encouraging. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, and it's all about just like it's almost silly, but you almost have to just like preface it for everyone and be like, we're a church that actually believes that every member is gifted.
Yeah.
And we've identified that with this person, their gifting is teaching and they really want to pursue it.
Yeah.
Here you go. They're going to teach this morning and stuff. And that's just how you like it doesn't have to be complicated. I was always annoyed when like there was like, I don't know, an intern or whatever. And they're like, well, we can't give them the big stage yet. Like that. Well, I remember in my first like full-time position, they were so scared for my first time preaching because they hadn't really like listened to me at youth group or whatever. And they're like, oh, is he going to be able to handle the big stage? Like it's so different because it's such a big stage and everything. I mean, I got better, but it was like, it was fine.
Yeah.
And people came up to me like, whoa, you're actually good. And it's like, thanks.
Yeah.
But like, it's just funny because like we treat it as this huge thing, like you're a musician performing for thousands of people.
Yeah.
It's like you're preaching God's word.
Yeah.
And if you can exposit it and explain it well, that's what matters.
But yeah, so I think something else to discuss with this, and this will kind of get us into the second paragraph where, we're going a little long, is we often try to individualize Christianity. And I think this is a fruit of an individualistic culture. We rarely think of common or corporate good. And it's funny because I was thinking this, I have like a 35 minute work commute in traffic, 25 without. And I was like, I feel like so much of traffic, especially in Calgary, is the result of people not thinking beyond their car. Because you think of it where you're like, oh, why is traffic backed up? Well, it's backed up because there's people trying to merge at the last minute up there. And you think, well, instead of pulling into the back of this line, I'm going to tear up this merge lane and try to merge at the last minute up there. And then you're just backing traffic up more.
Yeah.
Like, but
to save 10 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah. When it doesn't even like you're causing the problem, but because you don't think on a grand scale, you only think as far as your individual self, you're kind of making it worse. And I think that's fair of a lot of things, and that's like valid in the church. If we're just thinking about ourselves and what we need and what we want, it's gonna kind of hurt the overall health of the body that we're in. And it's interesting because I think even the way we read, so in 1 Corinthians, there's like several, he says a couple of times, he talks about Paul talks about like a little bit of yeast leavens the whole lump. And in 1 Corinthians 6, he's talking about, then he says your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. So in 1 Corinthians 6, when he says your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, he's talking about sexual sin. He's talking about you, and your body is not your own. Earlier, when he says a little bit, at least yeast leavens the whole lump, which he does say several times, he's actually, when he says your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, he's saying y'all's body is the temple of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
But we still read that so often with this individualistic lens. And what we miss there is that the message he's saying is if there's one person in your community who's like an awful sinner, because it's where he goes on to say, don't even have fellowship with people who unrepentantly sin in your congregation. So if there's people in your community that are just like continuing unrepentant sinners, it hurts the whole community is what he's saying. And that's like something that we miss even in scripture when we read it, because we read it so individualistically.
Yeah, we do miss a lot of those references to the church as a whole. And those are a lot of issues in church comes from that individual thinking on preferences. But also if we were to like start thinking more of like church as a whole in general, I think we would change a lot of things. There is a N.T. Wright, who I don't really recommend anymore. Sorry.
Yeah.
But he one of the reasons is because of this thing he calls the new perspective on Paul. And I'm not going to get into it, but he speaks of the new perspective on Paul, which is kind of like a more of a community focused salvation. To put it very basically, And people ripped him apart for it and everything. One of the things I appreciate about it is that it was actually thinking more about church as a community rather than church as individuals. Not saying I agree with this position, but which this gets into the next paragraph I think we can move into, is that like we need to be attending to both the physical and spiritual needs of our congregation as a whole, instead of just, we often are very much focused on ourselves. Like I need to take care of my spiritual life, my physical life as well. And you're thinking like, oh, I'm not getting a lot out of the pastor's sermon personally here. And you're not thinking of like the church as a whole, because it's like, I already know what the pastor said or whatever, but most people don't. And so like thinking of a congregation as a whole really changes your perspective on what the church is and what the church is about. And Christianity is a very like community focused religion. Even from the very beginning, like is literally about a nation of people, not individuals. So I think that's something very interesting. And I know what you wanted to get into is like this idea of like focusing on the spiritual and physical needs of our community.
I don't know for time if we want to read this whole paragraph.
No.
Yeah, but basically what it's getting to, I can read the scriptures that it references. 1 John 3:17 and 18 says, "But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth." And Galatians 6:10 says, "So then as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, and especially to those who are in the household of faith." Like, and this is something that I think is really hard. And it's funny because the end of the paragraph clarifies too. It's like, though we are to like give to everyone as there's need and according to our ability, it doesn't doesn't infringe the title or propriety with each man has his goods. Like it's saying it's communion, not communism. Like it doesn't mean that you don't own anything, but it means that you do have a responsibility to meet the needs of people in your church. And I think this is hard for people. And I mean, just based on the fact that you'll have churches with rich people and also people struggling to pay their rent, tells you that it's hard for people because that shouldn't really be happening.
Yeah.
If there's someone in your church with lots and someone with not enough.
And weirdly, it's seen as this thing that's like not Christian to help someone out with their rent.
Yeah.
Like it's like, oh, we're not giving to charity cases or anything.
Yeah.
But then it'll be like, we have a soup kitchen on Thursday for the homeless, which I know you have a lot to say about.
Yeah. I'll go off on that because it is relevant. Like I have such a beef with churches that are like, oh, time to serve the community. Let's do a soup kitchen, because it's super easy. It's super low commitment. You don't actually have to meet those people. You don't have to know them or speak into their lives. Like, because when I worked with the homeless, like, we did lunches, but also like my job specifically as an outreach worker was to actually get to know people and to learn their names and learn their situation and help them find connections. Whereas the average like church group that'd come in and volunteer, like splats the porridge onto the plate and then goes home.
Yeah,
like,
here you go, peasant.
Yeah.
We're so glad to help you.
And it makes you feel good. And then you can be like, yes, I served. Yes, we served the community. But the other, like, it's easy. It's like low commitment, but also it's ignoring the more immediate needs just in your congregation. Because even when I was on staff at a church, we'd have discussions where they're like, how can we serve the community more? Should we go out and do community service? And I was the one person on staff. I was a black sheep. I was like, there's single mothers in our congregation who like their appliances are breaking down and they can barely keep their house in order. Like, let's take care of them. And it almost seems like, oh, we can't take care of Christians.
They should have a job.
That's somehow bad for us to take care of Christians. We can only take care of non-Christians. But I mean, Galatians 6, he says, but especially those who are of the household of faith. Like, the idea is that our family, our household of faith is so strong and so healthy that out of that we can overflow into the community. Because, oh no, I think it looks pretty bad if we're like, hey, we're a church, so we just have so much, so we just want to give to the community. And like, they're like, wait, but isn't that person in your church also staying in a homeless shelter? Like,
Yeah.
when I've had that, I've bumped into people in shelters where I'm like, I know you. You're part of this church. Why are you in this homeless shelter?
Yeah.
Like, that should never happen.
Yeah. And there's so much that could be said of this, and I know we have to wrap it up, but that's something that I think we really get backwards is that outward focus of the inward. There's a church I know, and they have a freezer in their basement full of like meat and whatever else. People just bring it because they shoot a deer and have extra meat or whatever. That is specifically for people of that church who are struggling and need food for the week, because it's not just people. It's like people who have jobs and are trying to live, but they have like 4 kids and they're just trying to keep up, and they're having a really tough time in this moment, right? And so they're like, go to the freezer, take what you need, and bring it home. And that's kind of their attitude. And the pastor explained it as like, we will do like outreach stuff, but our first and foremost priority is the people who are part of this congregation, because we take care of one another as a family.
Yeah.
And we actually believe that will then affect people outside of our community and actually draw people in as well, because we're a different community like that. And that's their exact perspective of why like they have this freezer. It's for the congregation to come and take what they need. And I think people are like, that seems like very self-centered, but in the grand scheme of things, you're actually just taking care of your family.
Yeah. When it's your responsibility. I'm sure there's some, like, I've watched enough sappy, like, American sports movies that there's almost the trope of, like, the coach who neglects his own children.
Yeah.
And, like, clearly when you see that, you're like, that's messed up. He's investing all this time in his team, but neglects his own children. It's like, that's effectively what the church does when we're like, all right, people in our church struggling to get by. How can we serve the community outside of our church?
Yeah.
Like you're neglecting your primary responsibility.
Yeah.
But
at the end of all this, do not neglect your responsibility to take care of those members of your church. Like, take care of your community.
Yeah. Just think outside of yourself. Think about your church. Who can you encourage? Who can you empower? Do you have the ability to platform someone or to equip someone to work in their gifts? Then do that, because that is for your good and it's for the common good. Yeah. Do you have money? Why not support someone? Do you need money? Ask your family.
Yeah.
Like, be open about your needs. Anyways,
it's good.
That button. Well, we appreciate you listening. If you have any comments, questions, snide remarks, if you're offended by something we say, if you want to let us know what you think about Halloween, are we totally bonkers? Is it super demonic and wrong? Or is it just about miniature versions of full-size candy? We want to hear from you. You can comment on the video on YouTube. Actually, we really like that, because it makes YouTube go, oh, this video's popping, and then it pushes it to more people. You can also message us on Instagram @SinnerSuffers, or you can join our Discord. The link is all over the place. Link in our bio on Instagram.
Also,
link in the
if people have like good stories of what their church is doing in relation to this stuff,
yeah, let us know good stories. One that I've seen good stories as well too. Yeah. We're just running out of time. Anyways, if you want to support us, best thing you can do is just share this with people who you think would appreciate it, or share it with people who you think would be angry and leave an angry comment, because angry comments boost visibility too.
We enjoy it.
But yeah, we appreciate your likes, your comments. We appreciate hearing from you. You can also support us by buying coffee from vinecoffeeco.com and use the code SinnersDrinkCoffee for 15. Apparently it sounded like I said 50 last time.
Sorry,
15
I can't afford that.
% off of your coffee order. That is Kyle's company, so it is very directly going to support us. And also you get delicious coffee. You're not just like have money. You're actually getting something of value that you can enjoy. And think of us, remember us as you drink it. Right.
See ya.
Bye.